Welcome back to Fire Drill. As you can tell by my voice, I feel like crap, but I'm still here, still did a fire drill. And this fire drill, we had a lot. Like sometimes you think in the fall season, there's not a lot going on. We talked Nelly Korda. We talked Pat Perez and his comments about Phil. We got into that kind of. We talked about Alex Fitzpatrick and his exemption into Q School. But before I get into everything, let's talk about Dormy Workshop and PowerPoints. Both of those companies have been huge supporters of the Fire Drill, of Fire Pit Collective. Dormy Workshop, artisanal, Alan's word, club covers, putter covers, awesome stuff. Go check them out. And PowerPoints is a great scoring app. It really changes the way that you can enjoy playing golf. It's very cool. Download it and go make par. So thank you to both of those companies for supporting us. We talked about a lot of stuff. Oh, we talked about Ryo Ishikawa too. I love everything about this because it included a lot of great stories from Alan and Michael. Why I love to be on this podcast. They had some great stories about Roger Maltby, some ones that you probably haven't heard. And don't forget, all of these podcasts are on the YouTube channel. We put out a lot of awesome stuff on our YouTube channel, a bunch more coming out, including The Grind, which is going to be unreal. So go to our YouTube channel, like it, subscribe, do all the things you're supposed to do in order to get notifications for the awesome stuff, not only of this podcast, Need a Fourth, a new podcast that we have coming out, but all the stuff that's coming up. Without further ado, here's the three of us talking golf.
Guys, this has been a messy season in professional golf. We can all agree with that. But yesterday, this is a list of people who won big-time golf tournaments. Tony Finau, Tommy Fleetwood, Padraig Harrington, Nelly Korda. Personally, four of my favorite folks in the game. I mean, we all know that. And
Ryo Ishikawa in Japan.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, Ishikawa, back from the dead. I mean, he's only 31 years old. Like, the guy feels like he's had 3 careers already. We don't have to celebrate every victory so much as just acknowledge that it's nice when good things happen to good people. I mean, especially Tommy Fleetwood has been a little lost in the wilderness. He hasn't won in 3 years with a golf swing that beautiful. And, he's almost too nice to be a professional athlete, right? He's such a sweetheart. Maybe that's part of the issue, but I was delighted to see him break through. Finau has now reached the magical threshold of 5 victories, as we talked about last week with Russell Henley. That's it seems like all in the last month.
And Jonathan Bird.
Yeah. What are our thoughts on just a very pleasing weekend in professional golf?
What a week.
Huge week. And all kinds of like juiciness that we'll get to as well. But let's start like on the golf course for a change. We had good things happen on the golf course.
I will say, if I had to rank them in most important, I would put Nelly Korda as first, because she's just so important to the women's game, right? Like, she's a bona fide superstar, like obviously had some very serious health issues. Yes, it was like a relatively nondescript LPGA event, end of the season, but I just think she's so important to the women's game, the Korda sisters in general. I think if I had to rank them in importance, it's great to see Tommy Fleetwood win again. Like you said, good dude. Tony is obviously very well liked, and has moved up the like star ranking on the PGA Tour as they have lost some. But I think Nelly Korda's, just like from an importance standpoint, she is such a huge part of what the LPGA is going to be going forward. It's awesome to see her back.
Well, I would agree with that, but I would put Tommy Fleetwood first. I mean, it doesn't seem that long ago that there was a magical combination of Tommy Fleetwood and Francisco Molinari in the Ryder Cup, and you kind of hope that maybe that could go on forever. Of course, nothing really does, but sometimes these partnerships in golf do, like Seve and Olathibal and Sergio. To me, Tommy Fleetwood just I'm happily surprised for the PGA Tour's benefit that he did not go to LIV. He seemed like he might be the kind of candidate who could. And when he plays well, it's great for golf. And I would say the same of my big three, Alan would know this well, Ryan might not, but my big three for the last 5 years have been Tommy Fleetwood, Jordan Spieth, and the Italian detective Molinari. So I'm always rooting for those three.
Yeah. And of course, we're now less than a year from a Ryder Cup in Rome. I mean, wouldn't it be wonderful if Francesco could rediscover his form? But definitely, this European team is very much in transition, and they're looking at a lot of rookies and unproven players coming through as this entire generation of great players has been swept out to live. And so a guy like Fleetwood, who has experience, he's kind of in that, he's not old, he's not young, he's kind of in that sweet spot. If he's on his game, like that becomes a big deal, with or without Francesco as his wingman. And so a revitalized Tommy Fleetwood is a big deal when it comes to the Ryder Cup, and it's never too soon to start thinking about that for me.
Alan, do you have any insight as to why he didn't go to Live? Was he high on their list, as I would imagine he would be?
Yeah, he was. I mean, I think he's a very simple guy, and he loves his family. He loves playing the European Tour. He's found a nice home, moonlighting on the PGA Tour. And I think there's a small subset of humans that quality of life and routine and comfort and familiarity kind of trumps money. I mean, Tommy Fleetwood's already made a lot of money, and I think he realized that's a lot more money is not going to really change my life, but he just likes how things are. And he's just kind of, he doesn't overthink things, doesn't overcomplicate things. And it's an admirable trait. I mean, going to Live certainly has its benefits, but you're going to take a lot of shrapnel. You're going to lose out on all the places you've always enjoyed playing. You might be giving up the Ryder Cup. And I think Fleetwood was content. One thing I've always enjoyed about him is he just, even as if the game kicks him around, and he's had a lot of near misses, and he's blown a couple majors, but he does sort of exude gratitude and contentment. Like, hey, I'm playing golf for a living. How great is this? Like, that's always the energy I get from him, no matter what heartbreak gets dished out. And so I think he's one of those guys who's just happy with where he is. And so why blow everything up professionally?
And you do raise a very good point, because with this dual citizenship he has, on two very, very prominent tours, the European Tour and the U.S. Tour, for years now, he's played where he wants to play. And a Live golfer can't really say that. Well, can't say that.
It's an interesting thing. I mean, he comes from a pretty scrappy part of England, and I don't know that much about his family growing up, but I mean, he's always struck me as a guy who's, very middle-class sensibilities, and it becomes a philosophical thing. He's averaging what, $3 to $5 million a year. That's a phenomenal living. And if on Live, maybe he could make 8 or 10, but some people are happy with 3 or 5, right? I mean,
that's not a living, Alan. That is 1 year more than 10 families.
Exactly.
In the world
so I think in some small way, Tommy Fleetwood's a rebuke to the excesses of professional golf right now, and I salute him for it.
Just a quick note on not knowing his family. I don't know his family either, but 1 year, my friend Burtis Downs and I and others were having tea in downtown Birkdale the year that Spieth won. And Tommy's aunt was at the table next to us, having just come back from church, and we chatted her up, and she was delightful. That's all. I think that's maybe where my whole Tommy Fleetwood thing. You know what? My thing with Tommy Fleetwood began at a Marriott, the Sawgrass Marriott, where he was just like hanging out the entire week in the lobby, talking to whomever about anything. So he just has an easygoing nature, and it's a delight. He is.
Oh, well, yeah. And of course, the Ryder Cup in Paris where he was such a star. And some people remember that I had written a column a year ahead of that, basically predicting long-term American dominance. And largely because of Tommy Fleetwood, it didn't happen in Paris. It's still going to happen going forward. And vindication will be mine eventually. But certainly was not a great start. And so many people were so mad about that. And I got so much shrapnel. But Fleetwood and his caddy, too, who's great, Ian, they've always had a great sense of humor about it. And they see me and they laugh and they wind me up. And they were never mad about it. Like, they took it for what it was, which is just a little bit of crack, as they say in Ireland. And actually, so Ian Finnis is Tommy's caddy, who is a great dude, so garrulous, and he's just a mountain of a man, but he's as sweet as his boss. He sent me a DM, said, I'm at the airport. I'm going to buy the Phil book. I need something to read. I said, I'll send you one. Don't be ridiculous. He's like, no, I'll buy it. Like, I'm excited. And it was like really cute, just DM me for no reason other than to share that. So anyway,
I think we need to talk about, I would love to hear what you guys about Ryo Ishikawa. The dude, every time he wins, and it has been 3 years since he's won. He's 31 years old. He has 18 wins on the Japan Tour. His first win came when he was 15 years old. It's just ridiculous. It's insane. His career prior to that. And I wonder, someone tweeted, like, do you think he'll ever come back to the PGA Tour at me? And I was like, if he was ever, this would be the time to do it, because Hideki has taken, a lot of the pressure that he was the maiden son off of him. It would be very interesting to see what his career would be if he ever came back to the PGA Tour, because the first time he came here, he played okay. Not obviously didn't win or anything like that, but he kept his card a few years in a row. But the entire nation was like, he was the maiden son.
I think it's the prodigal son.
Yeah, prodigal son. Okay. Whatever. I don't know these words.
But we don't know. He might view the U.S. Tour like an American player might view the Live Tour. In other words, he's got a home tour. He's happy there. He's been very successful there. And why does he need to chase the U.S. Tour necessarily for any reason, really? But I do remember when he played in that 2010. I think I have that year correct, Alan. Correct me if I don't. He got paired with Tom Watson for those first two rounds. And Watson is nobody's fool when it comes to assessing talent. I remember Watson saying to Brooks Koepka early on, it's like, this guy is absolutely the real deal. And then Watson said that week that this Ryo Ishikawa was the real deal. So, but maybe he's just very happy doing what he's doing.
Well, you remember, of course, you do remember this, Ryan, because you're a barn rat completist. But whatever, it was a month ago when Kyrgios, had those very moving comments about how lonely he's been over here and how hard it's been as kind of a stranger in a strange land. And I think that's maybe something Ishikawa's had to weigh. I mean, you can actually accrue pretty good world ranking points on the Japan Tour, at least in the old formula. And the Asian Tour is becoming more and more important in the grand scheme of things. I mean, it just may be that he doesn't love it over here and doesn't feel comfortable, and the golf courses are different.
Yeah.
And I don't know, but he did have a great nickname. Remember, they used to call him the Bashful Prince. Like, that's tough to beat.
Yeah, John Peterson tweeted about the Bashful Prince and said he played probably the most tour rounds of anybody he played with. It was with Ryo, and he just loved him. And I mean, everybody that I talked to loves him.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing him at some event. I'm sure it's the Buick Open, but he always had club covers. His driver cover was of himself, and it matched what he was wearing. Do you remember that? Like, if he was wearing pink and a visor, his head cover was him in a pink outfit with a visor. I mean, it was ridiculously awesome.
That's next level.
I mean, you have made it when you have made it when you have a club cover of yourself, but it also matches what you're wearing that day. I mean,
he has a suitcase full of club covers for every outfit.
Yeah, he's like, I got to do this. Oh, and I got to bring his scripting, like the guys that do scripting on the at the Masters, includes a head cover for his driver.
That's next level. Yeah. Well, I would, if it's in his heart, I would love to see him make another go at it, because there was so much promise there. And you bring up a really good point about Hideki he's the Masters champ, he's the man, and the crush of Japanese media around Ishikawa his first time around was suffocating just to watch. I couldn't imagine what it was like to be him in the middle of it. So it would definitely be a lot more relaxed, and I think that would certainly serve him well. And it's different. He's a hardened tour pro now versus a teenager, so it'll be interesting to see how he builds on this. And of course, Liv famously kind of opened the vault for Hideki, and he turned them down. I mean, I'm sure now Ishikawa's on their radar screen. Like, that's always a subtext when a player has success now. What does that mean in the context of Liv recruitment? But
one quick note, especially for our younger members of our audience, but Seve Ballesteros became one of the greatest golfers of all time, one of the most charismatic golfers of all time, by sticking to his home tour, the European Tour, and playing major championships. he came to the United States. He never really liked it here, never really made his mark here. But there is more than one way, of course, to the World Golf Hall of Fame, but just to becoming an iconic figure in world golf aside from the U.S. Tour. It's always been the case.
That's right. And even, Jumbo Ozaki, who's going back many generations now, but really pioneered Japanese golf, he hardly ever left Japan. He was skipping the Masters because he didn't want to leave Japan. So, and he's remains a revered figure. So you're right, Michael. And especially through social media and all interconnected world. If Ishikawa's going to start winning regularly in Japan, that'll be felt elsewhere. So it'll be really interesting to see what he does. Let's talk about Tony Finau, because the guy has been on an absolute heater. He was for half a decade considered some. First of all, it was an amazing story he made to the tour, given his humble circumstances. But you could see the physical talent, and then he was kind of an underachiever who couldn't quite win despite all the top tens. And now he's winning at a furious clip. He's worked on his golf swing. He's done this, that, and the other, but it just seems like a comfort level and a confidence thing. And it is fun to see him in full flight. And it makes you wonder, how is this really, is he on a tear, or is this going to become his standard to play, which would be awesome to behold? So what are our thoughts on Tony Finau?
You said it, Alan, but the fact that he's on the PGA Tour is ridiculous. Turned pro at 17, played many tours his whole life. A couple of side notes on my side of the golf that I cover. He was the leading money winner on a tour called the All Pro Tour, I believe. I don't know. No, it doesn't matter. He was a leading money winner, and the tour went bankrupt, and he never got paid. Or he eventually did, but it was only part of it. And I remember I caddied on that tour when a couple players stayed. There was an event in Chicago, and I caddied on the tour, and everybody's like, "Oh my God, this Tony Finau guy is great." And second of all, I tweet out often when Tony wins, and I didn't do it this time, but it was a Genesis Monday qualifier, whatever it was called before the
LA Open. Is that what we're referring to?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, and he finished dead last in the Monday qualifier. Dead freaking last. Shot 82 with an eagle, by the way. And it's just like no one knew who the hell Tony Finau was back then. He was a mini tour player forever. Now, granted, he turned pro very young, but his path is ridiculous. The fact that he is a top player in the world right now, it just shouldn't be. His story is not told enough that he has gotten to this point.
Well, and it's a detail I love that, in his basically unheated garage in Utah, to hit balls in the winter, his dad just hung a mattress on off the ceiling, and Tony would just hit it into a mattress like that. That's about as no frills as it gets. And I remember, he said, "Yeah, we had maybe a little space heater, but my hands would be numb by the end." And it's a great story. It's a great image. You can just imagine that sound, thwap, hitting the ball in the mattress over and over. It reminds me of Rocky, hitting the big, meat carcasses in the freezer. It's kind of analogous, and that'll definitely harden an athlete. So it's cool that Tony's accessed that and, in winning time now.
And his place in tournament golf owes the most to the emergence of Tiger Woods in the late 70s and the early 2000s. Tony's place does. More Jordan Spieth and Justin Thomas, they would have found their way to golf even if there had never been a Tiger Woods. But Tony Finau really needed Tiger Woods to emerge to make golf cool, interesting, and something he aspired to do. Because otherwise, some of Tony Finau's athleticism is going to pursue one sport, basketball. That was the sport. And I know this because he's told me this. I'm sure he's told to many others as well. So it's a significant nod. His whole career and path is a significant nod to Tiger. And I would just one other quick note. Of course, we're all obsessed with the golf swing. We're all trying to get better at golf. But I think Tony Finau's actual golf swing, like Jon Rahm's, but it's different as well. It's so different from Phil Mickelson's, and it's so different from Sam Snead's. And it's just further proof that for all of the advancement in golf instruction, there is no one way to go about this business of how to hit a golf ball and how to shoot the lowest scores over 72 holes. And I find that very inspiring. Pardon me, very inspiring as well.
That's well said. And one of the first people who really encouraged Finau to go for it and gave him a pep talk like, "Son, you can do this," was Lee Trevino. They crossed paths when Finau, I think, was still a teenager, and Lee Buck saw something special in this kid. And like you were saying, as Tom Watson has an eye for talent, probably Lee Trevino might be the greatest talent scout there is. Like he just understands the game in such a visceral, sort of instinctive level. And Finau's talked about how important that was to have as Lee as a mentor. And obviously talk about, in some ways, Lee Trevino was Tiger before Tiger in that he was a public course golfer. He did not look like the typical tour player. He had to break through various stereotypes. And so I think, any golfer of color is going to feel a certain kinship. And for Trevino to reach out to Finau is really cool. And that's part of his journey as well.
That is really neat. And just one quick thing that triggers. Last year at the father-son tournament, Trevino was there. It's just, he's in his early 80s. He looks great. It's just a total pleasure to watch Lee Trevino play golf or hit golf balls or be on the range with Tiger Woods as he was. And Roger Maltby, the course whisperer, was there for Golf Channel or NBC Sports. And I said to Raj,
not anymore.
And I said to Raj, does anybody know more about the golf swing than Lee Trevino? And Raj said, no, nobody knows more about his own swing than Lee Trevino knows about his. I don't know if I made that, just could you follow?
We followed it. It was a long road to a small house, but we followed
what?
It.
No, it's big in the end because, in other words, he knew his thing, and as you say, he had a great eye for other things. But so I would distinguish a little bit between Lee Trevino and Tiger. What you said about golfers of color and not being welcome in public golf, of course, that well said and all completely true. But it would be completely unimaginable for Lee Trevino coming off a driving range at Augusta National, as Tiger allegedly once did, and saying, Tiger said to Hank Haney, "You better fucking give me something right now." Lee Trevino just had to look inside himself to figure out what he needed to do. And of course, that's why Lee Trevino is held in such awe by generations of players who came, his generation and generations that came after him.
Real quick, about the Houston Open, because this is Tyson Alexander, son of famous Florida coach Buddy Alexander, finished second. And I tweet this often, but like no one saw Tyson Alexander's results and didn't think he should quit. 3 years. He took him 7 years to get to the Korn Ferry Tour. In 3 years, he missed at first stage by a combined 39 strokes. He missed by 12, he missed by 15, and he missed by 12 again. Like, he would never, talking about people who are not supposed to get here. 11 years into his pro career, first time on tour, and 4 events into his PGA Tour career, finished second. And basically has his card locked up for next year. It's ridiculous. No way he should be here. And Tyson's a good dude that I've talked with, some, but ridiculous. The guy missed a billion times at first stage and somehow is now, kept his card. It's ridiculous.
Alan, do you remember his mother?
Joan? Yes, of course. Yeah. For those who are wondering where Michael's mind is, Joan Alexander was a media official for the PGA Tour. A very nice person. But is that did she marry into the family, or is that his actual mother? I've never been clear on that.
I can't say.
Okay.
Oh my God.
No, it's not that I can't say. I don't know.
Right.
Good Lord. Michael has an NDA with Joan Alexander we don't know about.
No, it's yeah. We'll tidy this up after the pod and make a few phone calls. But
no,
actually,
okay. One second. I think this is
you'll love this, Ryan, because when I was on the Latino America tour in early 2018, doing that big story for Golf Magazine, he was playing the tour, and we talked, and I found him very engaging. But even then, he was kind of pondering his future. We were like in this crazy journey. Turns out to get from Jamaica to Costa Rica is almost impossible, and we were all on this flight. I think a lot of people flew back into the U.S. and then went north to go south. And one guy went through Toronto to save money. Like if you look at a map, to go from Jamaica to Toronto to Costa Rica is absolute insanity. But he saved like $300, so he did it. And anyway, but even Tyson back then was like, I don't know, man. Like I question what I'm even doing here. And it was dark times. And so now 4 years later, as you said, he's now a legit PGA Tour player. It's awesome to see.
And everybody knows that Tyson's paternal grandfather was a drinking buddy of and golf partner of
Bobby Jones.
Arnold Palmer.
Yes.
Yep.
Holy shit. I mean, this is why I'm on this pod. It's so crazy that like, what? Who? Like only Michael Bamberger and Alan Shipnuck would just come in and like, oh, I hung out with him at the Latin American tour. And then his grandpa was drinking buddies with Arnold Palmer. I was just like, I don't know, man. I have some Q School stats. I always feel so dumb on this podcast.
No, don't even go there.
Just wait, Alan.
Ryan, I'm hearing from people who aren't buying this bullshit. So don't even.
Just like I put up some Q School stats and you tie it back to Arnold Palmer. Like what the hell?
We wouldn't even be talking about Tyson Alexander if you hadn't brought him up, Ryan.
Fair enough. I've done my job. But we also need to talk about the fact that Michael Bamberger, for those not watching on YouTube, okay, Michael Bamberger has a perfectly pressed white dress shirt on, a very nice cardigan, probably from, I'm going to guess, Ralph Lauren or something, you know. And before the pod started, he got off and he has PJ pants on. It's like, and I mean, it's amazing.
Ryan,
I love it.
It's business on top, party on the bottom. Everybody knows this.
I love it. I mean, people watching on YouTube are like, "Oh my god, he has a nice look at him. He got a sweater and a dress shirt on. Man just got out of bed a couple minutes ago before we started this."
Indeed.
I would never go down this road. I'm not going down this road, but I would never buy a Ralph.
I know that's
okay.
Ryan, apologize.
Sorry.
But you should know that Michael has a deep affinity for the hard collar polos to the point that if you sees him at some Florida pro shop, he'll like clean the whole joint out. He has like a lifetime supply. Tell us tell us about this, Michael. You have a history with these shirts.
Well, no. We're not going to do a whole thing on that, but very briefly, Alan will appreciate this. I once, many years ago, I was playing golf at Cypress Point Club, and I was playing with a gentleman named Chuck Winston. It was just a great gent, and you had to wear a coat and tie at lunch at Cypress Point in those days. And he had a hard collar golf shirt on that would accommodate the tie, so he wouldn't have to change from lunch to the first tee. And I think that's maybe where my thing started. Like, this really actually makes sense. Now, of course, nobody wears a tie at lunch anymore, but I don't know. It's a whole thing.
Yeah, that's funny. All right, one last winner. Let's just do a little chit chat about Padraig Harrington, who's one of the real originals in the game and has had a terrific year on the senior tour. I absolutely love Padraig. He's so much fun. And one story that makes me laugh is, if you remember, he won the British Open and he won the PGA Championship. And so he was going into Augusta trying to win 3 majors in a row. And I got a sit-down interview with him maybe 6 weeks ahead of the Masters to do a big Masters preview story. And I'd done all these stats, and I showed up with a big like yellow legal pad. And I really wanted to like talk through how he was going to attack Augusta. And I had stat upon stat, and he looked at my notebook and he said, "Put that away." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "I don't even want to see that." He's like, "Get that out of here." Like, he was like really like somewhat exercised. I said, "Why?" I said, "It's just a bunch of stats." He's like, "I know you're going to ask me all these questions about how I've played this hole and this shot." He said, "I don't want to be standing out there during the Masters thinking about, oh, the 14th hole is where I have my highest stroke average. And you're the one who put that thought in my head." He's like, "Banish that notebook." I was like, well, okay, Padraig, but like, I had a whole thing here. And he's like, "I'm sorry. I'm not trying to be mean." He's like, "That's how fragile I am. I cannot be standing over a shot at Augusta National thinking about a stat you put in my head 6 weeks earlier." And that amazed me, but I thought it was like so much insight into the guy. And we had a very cordial conversation after that, but I just totally had to wing it because all my months of preparation went out the window because he's like a cat on a hot tin roof.
Absolutely, one of the funniest, smartest people in golf. And it's funny, Alan, when we and Ryan, when we come up with lists of people who would be good TV commentators, and we often say Phil, of course, and Colin Montgomery, of course, but Padraig would be the best of them all. I've never really had that thought before, but he would be absolutely fantastic.
This is a different conversation. I mean, he just fascinates me. And I said, so what have you been working on, in your golf swing? I know you're always working on something. He's like, I've been thinking about the position of my tongue. I was like, like it was like a record scratch. Like, he said, yeah, because where you position your tongue affects your jaw. And if your jaw can affect your entire spine, he's like, so I've been experimenting hitting shots with my tongue in different positions and with different levels of force against my jawline. And I was like, man, that's some next level stuff right there. But he was dead serious.
Along those lines, when you look at stop action photographs of like even Ernie Els, when you see him at impact, speaking of their jaw, their veins are always sticking out of their neck and they're all clenched and they're all tight. And it's just such a reminder of what an athletic act hitting a golf ball is. Even if the overall picture is smooth and relaxed, that moment of impact takes oomph. So I think he's probably onto something. As if I need another thing to screw up my golf game.
I got enough.
Yeah, Michael will have his tongue out when we're playing next.
All right, so a victory that was overlooked by many golf fans, but has meaning to us, was Andy Ogletree winning in Egypt as part of this international series on the Asian Tour. And Andy Ogletree has accidentally become a very important person in the world of golf. He played one live event in London, finished, I believe, dead last by a lot. But that if you're talking about this antitrust lawsuit between the PGA Tour and Live Golf, which could blow up the entire landscape of professional golf, Andy Ogletree's experience is going to be Exhibit A, because he was basically suspended by the tour, and this is a guy who had no status, had nowhere to play, more or less. And that's why he lunged at the first opportunity that was available to him, which was Live Golf, and now he's been banished by the tour. Now, he wasn't suspended for life; it's basically till the end of this year. And his agent Mac Barnhart, who's appeared on this podcast a few times, feels like they're going to be in position to get Andy back on the PGA Tour, and if not, they'll have a very strong case that the tour is colluding against him, because he was not a PGA Tour member. He was not a lifetime member like a Dustin or Phil Mickelson. This is just a young player desperate for a place to play. So, Ryan, what are your thoughts on Ogletree's victory and what it means?
Yeah, I mean, huge to him. I mean, it's his first professional victory. He's just, I mean, the podcast, I encourage a lot of people to go back. I tweeted about him all week. He led from the second day on. And I mean, he shot 23 under, and I mean, stared down burned. Weisberger made an eagle on 10, hold out for 10, like got it within 2, and Andy just played well. But I tweeted about it all weekend. It really felt like Andy was at he was at a point of, I'm not sure, how many more years he can go on, even as the U.S. amateur champion, just hasn't played well. And, finally got over some injuries. But I just encourage people to go back and listen to that podcast. It's easy from the outside to say he made a stupid decision to go to Live and get suspended and all those kind of things. And it's just not that simple. It's complicated, and he didn't have a place to play, and he was out of money, and all the things that a lot of pros go through. And no matter how he felt about Live, and I mean, he seems to be supportive of it, which is understandable. He went there. But a lot of players in his position would have taken the one start, and he was hurt and not playing well at the time, obvious by his score. But I think it's huge in the pro golf landscape, as you said, Alan, that the Asian Tour is a viable option. Today starts the first Asian Tour Q School in the United States. It's only going to grow from here. If Live continues to grow, Asian Tour is a huge part of it. The guy won $270,000. It's almost double what you're going to win on the Korn Ferry Tour for an event. It's a huge part of this story in pro golf, and I think Andy kind of just proved that it's a viable way to do it.
Going forward through Live Golf, you're going to be able to play your way onto Live through the Asian Tour. It may only be a handful of spots, but it's an actual road to a big time golf tour where we know the purses are huge. And so, yeah, we've talked about this previously. We don't have to go really deep again, but it's quite likely that the Asian Tour is going to surpass the European Tour in its importance in the scheme of global golf. And especially if you're a young player and a young American, Ryan's whole career has been built on highlighting how cutthroat it is to try and make it from Canada or Latin America to the Corn Ferry to Monday to try and just get on the PGA Tour where it's so hard to keep your card. And if Asia is turning out to be a very viable option, and for a young American, the United States amateur champion, to go over there and highlight that for his other colleagues, I think that's powerful.
And quick thought about that, Alan. I don't think a lot of people would appreciate the fact that LIV is evolving very quickly here. And one of the things that I think it's been a very legitimate criticism is that it's an invitation-only series of tournaments. And of course, what you're establishing here, what you're describing here, is that that's not the case. So you can play your way onto the LIV Tour via the Asian Tour, which, I mean, it's very different how it's done on the PGA Tour, but still proves that there is a merit path. There's a lot of different ways to define merit, but there is one very concrete numbers only path via Asian Tour success that will get you on the LIV Tour. Is that accurate, Alan?
I mean, it may only be 3 spots. It may only be 1 spot week to week. It fluctuated as this season went on, but there's definitely going to be a path, and that is significant. It's also important from the world rankings, because that's one of the criteria that the world rankings has set out, is that you need to be able to essentially play your way onto the tour if you want world ranking points. So that LIV is trying to check those boxes. I mean, they've tried to barge their way in when it comes to ranking points. I think they're realizing that's not going to be that easy, and so they're going to have to abide by some of the pre-established criteria, and that's an important one. Is there has to be, there's you're going to love this, Ryan. There's strong conversation about adding a Monday Q.
I've heard.
Yeah. So, again, even if it's only 1 spot, it's like that could change a career. So yeah, as you're right, Michael, LIV is adapting to the realities. They try to do it their way. Nothing wrong with that. I think they've realized that, okay, it's going to be more complex, and they're going to have to make some tweaks, and that's ongoing. So,
if Greg Norman is listening, I think I tweeted out that I'll take $20 million to come cover the Monday qualifiers, but I talked to my non-existent agent, and he said 15 seems more reasonable. So 15 million, Greg, if you're listening. Probably going to accept 10 if we're being honest.
Well, Ryan, the agent's supposed to ask for more than what the talent is. Right. So I don't. Something's wrong with this whole.
My agent is my wife.
Just make one quick note about Andy Ogletree. Of course, it takes enormous talent to make it in golf, but I think just the fact that he won this tournament. Here's a kid from small town Mississippi. His father owned a Piggly Wiggly there, and now he's playing in Egypt. And it just is another demonstration of you have got to have the grit gene to make it in golf. And it's neat to see, and it's a tremendous testimony to him. I remember when, of course, we all remember, if we follow golf closely, when he won the USAM, and then many of us would remember how well he played when Tiger was the defending Masters champion in 2020. That was the postponed Masters in November when Dustin Johnson won, and he played beautifully the Thursday, Friday rounds in the presence of Tiger Woods. Not easy to do. And then he fell off the earth, and it would be easy to say, like, we'll never hear from this kid again. And I watched just a brief clip of him yesterday. I was like, I almost literally would not have even recognized him. But it's a great testimony to what's deep inside him without even really knowing. Just the fact that you saw his name in the agate listing of a tournament in Egypt and that he won is phenomenal.
And I always think that top amateurs like that, I see a lot of them in mini tour events. I think it's just so hard mentally, guys, to get back, right? Like, I mean, Andy was the U.S. Open champion, played at Georgia Tech, had exemptions into PGA Tour events, and not that long after that, 2 years, he's playing the G Pro. Listen, the G Pro is a fine mini tour, but it is miles and oceans and countries away from PGA Tour events. And mentally, it's just got to be so hard. The guy had, exemptions and I'm sure sponsors and those kind of things. And golf, people forget quickly, and sponsors forget, and people don't give a shit about you anymore when you start to play poorly. And Andy had points that he said about the LIV and the PGA Tour, but Andy went wherever he could play. I saw him at the Colorado Open, played on the Golden State Tour, played on the G Pro Tour, played where he could play, and now he's back. I love the fight part of it, because he was at the top of the world, literally, and fell to near the bottom.
Yeah, I mean, and look at these players we're talking about. Nelly Korda, obviously tremendously gifted, but blood clot in her arm. Her sister just hurt her back and is out. There's adversity there. Tommy Fleetwood been kicked around the last 3 years. He comes back and wins in Africa, of all places. We talked about Finau. I mean, I like that, the grit gene, Michael. It's a real thing. And even Padraig, he was a good European Tour player, and he knew he had more inside of him, and he dedicated himself to blowing up his entire golf swing in his game because he felt like there was another level there for him. And it was a gamble, right? I mean, this is a guy who famously took an accounting degree because he wasn't sure he could make it as a touring pro, but he knew what he had inside of him, and of course it paid off. Winning majors, he can be a Hall of Famer, and now he's having a great final act on the senior tour. So, I mean, we talk so much about talent. That's a word that gets thrown around so much, but grit is probably the delineator in professional golf. And
I've said this a million times, but the greatest grinder I've ever seen in golf, they're the two guy I caddied for named Billy Britton, who's who played in the 80s. But the single greatest grinder in the history of golf is Tiger Woods. There's no question about it.
He fought so hard for every stroke. I mean, it's true. Yeah. This would be a great place to end the podcast, but there's some other things we should talk about because everyone's talking about them. And we were just talking about LIV Golf, and the big news out of LIV this week is Pat Perez's war on Phil Mickelson. He had some very spicy comments, and of course, people have been asking me about them. So I will say this: I knew there was history there, and in the writing of the Phil book, I went to Perez and I said, I've heard this particular rumor from a lot of people. And he didn't want to talk about it. And then when he signed up with LIV, I went back to him. I was like, I mean, you're now in a very cloistered environment with Phil. I mean, come on. And he's like, I'm not going to talk about it. And in this very litigious moment in golf, I let me choose my words carefully. I will just say that involves Mrs. Perez. Phil did something that deeply offended her and Pat, and
is Phil did something, or Phil is alleged to have done something?
Correct. Well, according to Pat, Phil apologized for it, and so yes, he's alleged to have done something. He's alleged to have apologized for it. This is an open secret in the world of golf. Many people know the details. Some claim to have seen evidence of whatever happened. So I think we'll leave it vague for the listeners to try and connect the dots.
LIV Golf, in some aspects, has become like the WWE. It's like they have, the WWE, if you said, hey, two of our best players, our name players, would have some sort of fight, that's great. That's great. I mean, they are kind of it's so wild what is going on the LIV Tour. It's just crazy. I mean, it's insane.
And this has obviously been bubbling up inside of Perez for a while. It's funny that he would make it public, and by making it public but not adding any real details, of course, it's just going to touch off all kinds of rampant speculation. And someone's going to ask him about it again. Someone's going to ask Phil about it. I would say it was not masterful public relations. If you want to get off his chest, he should have just put it all out there And now it's just going to have multiple news cycles. But you're right, Ryan. I mean, it's the personalities on that tour are so fascinating. And
man, would I love to be in the room when Pat and Phil get together at the first event next year? You know, obviously they avoid each other socially, it seems. But man, would I love to be at the first live event when those two are in the room together, especially as you said, it's eventually all the details are eventually going to come out. He's opened a can of worms. Somebody's going to put it out there, as you know better than anyone. Like the story, I heard the story way before I started with Fire Pit. Like, I mean, it's relatively known, and so it's like it's going to come out, and then they're going to have to meet. And there's only 54 players. It's not like there's different waves or whatever. They're going to see each other.
I mean, I've always described the PGA Tour as high school with money. You know, it's this very insular world. It's very gossipy. And live is times 3 because it's a third of the size. So it's like everything's more intense. It's a smaller group of people, and they're really bound together, their fortunes and their livelihoods in a way. On the PGA Tour, it was every man for himself. Live is different. It's an interconnected network of golfers who need each other, not only through this team element, but you know, they know that the future of this thing is not set. Like, you know, the Crown Prince, if he could just wake up tomorrow and be like, this is a bad idea, and pull the plug, right? I mean, that's an actual possibility. It's not a self-sustaining entity like the PGA Tour. So like these guys are bound together. Their professional fortunes are linked. And so it makes it all that much more intense. And so any little feuding like this takes on more importance. So yeah, it's
Alan, how come we haven't heard anything about the Dustin Johnson Brooks Koepka relationship for a while? How are those two getting along?
They're getting along fine. I mean, you know, they had this dust up Sunday night in Paris after the Ryder Cup. The story I heard, which is so lame, I don't know even, it's like, I've tried to fact check it. I've never gotten anywhere, but that they were all hanging out, and and of course you've got the wives / girlfriends in the mix. And that's a whole other subtext to live, is like, if you look at in all of golf, which significant others have the biggest profiles and love the attention the most and are the thirstiest, to use the vernacular. I mean, they're all on Live Golf now. It's just unbelievable. And so you have Brooks, and you have Jenna, and you have Dustin and Paulina. And supposedly, this is what I've heard. I can't say it's true, but it makes me laugh that this is actually it. That some group wanted to go out in the town in Paris, and some other group didn't want to. And there was an argument, and it was something about who was responsible for calling a car, and Brooks and Dustin got into it. Like, it was like so prosaic, and you know, who knows? And
as I said last week about the Reeds having their own reality show, it should be followed up directly by just the, you know, Real Housewives of Live Golf, right? Like 100%.
Well, they've said they're
the Reeds.
Yeah, the Reeds. Yeah, we didn't even talk about Justine.
Yeah. I mean, the personalities over there, Mrs. Perez, Jenna, Justine, holy moly, there's a lot of room. There's a lot of personalities.
I think, I don't know, did I even mention this on a podcast? I tweeted it when I was at the Live event in Chicago. Jenna drove by in a cart with their dog, this black lab. I think his name is Cove. I've seen it on social media, right? Like, it was so funny. I love dogs. I love dogs on golf courses in the UK, but I'd never seen a dog on the tournament grounds. Like, it was just so funny.
I once saw a very charming thing in a Marriott parking lot. Brooks, Jenna, and dog going for a walk early in the morning before a tournament.
Yeah, I mean,
you're devoted to that dog.
Listen,
probably others.
Nobody loves their dog more than I love my dog.
It's a well-traveled dog.
Yeah. Well, yeah. When you got your own plane, it's not a big deal. But it's just as to the point of, I mean, there's an element of absurdity to all of this, and
hey, Jake, if you don't put the little clip that I put up on Twitter of Mrs. Perez going, "This new tour is going to be iconic," right here, you've missed out.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. I mean, anyone who follows Ashley Perez on social knows she's not a shrinking violet. So anyway, yeah, it's wild. Let's move
Alan,
on.
is Amy Mickelson up to playing the role of Barbara Nicholas for this new tour?
I mean, she's well positioned in that she's so beloved and respected. But I have not seen Amy Mickelson at any tournament since the November Masters. That's 2 years ago now.
Oh, wow.
Just have not seen her at a major championship. You know, she wasn't at Kiowa when Phil won.
What about the Ryder Cup in Wisconsin?
She was there. I guess that's a different deal. That's such a team thing, and you know they have an actual procession of wives in the opening ceremony. I'm accepting that, but just a regular, whether it's a tour event, a live event, or a major. I haven't seen her. I'm not saying she hasn't been there, but usually she's very easy to spot, and so she's definitely curtailed her travel, or at least her public profile. So I don't know if she wants that role or not. I mean, she kind of had it, even up until Phil left the PGA Tour. But yeah, it's so funny in golf. And like, I've been reading this biography of Greg Norman that's written in the 90s. And
Lauren St. John, maybe?
That's a great pull by you, Michael. It's a good book, actually. And she did a really nice job. And there's so much Laura Norman in the book. And all this talk about she's just there after every round. She's on every plane flight. She's part of every business meeting. And it's just funny how in golf, the wives have such public roles. Like, I know LeBron James is married, and it seems like she's a very nice person, but you never hear anything about her in any context of his professional life. Whereas, you know, when Harold Varner goes to live, the headlines were Harold Varner's wife encourages him to go to live. Like, it's just a whole thing in golf that's so interesting because they don't really have teammates. Right. And so, and the effect of Justine Reed on Patrick's career, we know, has been significant, not just caddying for him in the Mondays, where we know nothing untoward happened because we've spoken about this in the past, and on down the line. So it's amazing the prominence of these wives. They are definitely gifts from the content gods. I agree with that.
Alan, what is your insight into whether Greg Norman's going to be moved and whether somebody new might be coming in, namely Mark King?
As of right now, I don't think it's going to happen. It doesn't mean it won't happen next year. I think that they're trying to hold the line and keep everything cohesive going into next season. Like, clearly, we've talked about this before. Liv is way ahead of where any of us thought it would be. This acquisition of players. Now they're trying to bake out the team elements and trying to get better tournament venues. And this is not the moment to blow things up. But, you know, Norman is working really hard on all the details. Like, he's involved on a granular level, and the guy's almost 70 years old. I'm not sure how much he wants that grind. Clearly, if there's ever going to be a reapproachment with the tour, Norman's got to go because he's been such a thorn in the side of the PGA Tour and Jay Monahan. So I could see a year from now, he will declare victory and he will exit stage left. And you know, Mark King, the former TaylorMade czar, he's been talked about quite a lot as a potential successor. You know him very well, Michael. I mean, I think he'd be well suited for the job, whether he wants it or not, unknown. But I think that right now that Norman's on pretty solid footing, and he had some public missteps. He said some dumb things early on, but they kind of put him on ice. Like, Greg Norman took a much lower media profile the second half of the season. That was by design. You know, he's you have to give him a lot of credit. I mean, he helped build this thing, and so it's his baby. I don't think he's going anywhere in the short term.
The real question about Liv is, how do they fix the Niblix?
It's kind of one of my regrets is that I didn't lean into that. Like, it could have been a bit at every press conference. Like, ask so many questions about the teams when even the players didn't, just like, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, is there strife among the Niblix? You know, how's the team camaraderie on the Niblix?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a real part of this offseason is what Liv is going to, how they're going to break out the team element. And
I really think that, just a side note about that, here is how LIV has changed the world of golf, and this is not a parody or a joke. There's a guy, his name's Landon Mickelson, ironically, that has played mini tours for a long time and is trying to start a new mini tour, and it is based off of the team concept, and it's basically a mini tour of LIV. It's like a little 4-person. They're trying to get investors to purchase little teams, at a very minimal cost for people that basically want to gamble on mini tour golf. And it's wild. Like, LIV has had so far-reaching effects on the game of golf. It has literally reached the mini tour level now.
But it seems like that's tough to do because all your players ultimately just want to leave that tour. Like, they want to move up. Like, how are you gonna have any cohesion? But I guess that's part of the fun, is you just keep bringing in new bodies. And okay, we barely mentioned this like half an hour ago. Let's just, before we go, let's pour out a little almond milk or whatever it is for Roger Maltby and Gary Koch. Like, they've been a big part of our lives. They've been in our living rooms for many years now, and NBC's parted ways. I mean, we all love Roger, especially, such a character. And Michael, tell us a good story about one or both of them.
Well, everyone knows when Raj won when he won the Memorial Tournament, I think in '75, I think the first place check was $40K, and they really gave you a check back then, not the cardboard thing. Raj went to a bar and lost the check at the bar.
That's amazing.
So great.
Did you not know that one, Alan?
I mean, I thought it was apocryphal. I'd never heard the details. That's fantastic.
No, I think it's true. Roger, very, very, very insightful golf guy. And just a quick note about Gary Koch, very, very insightful golf guy, and totally different personalities, but they did their jobs really well for a long time. And I think they, like Venturi, they brought a lot of comfort to people for a lot of years because they were just so familiar and good at their job, and they were a presence in the game, obviously, and just. To those of us who've been around the game, I never knew Gary, but Roger was always, I've been in a lot of hotels with him and other places, or some hotels, and just a warm, endearing person. And the year that when Tiger won the U.S. Open at Torrey Pines, that week particularly, I spent a lot of time with Roger, and I picked up a lot that week. But one thing I would say in particular was that. Tiger has very, very high standards, and I could see that he obviously respected Roger, and that said a lot to me about Roger as well. But anyway, they'll be missed.
I have a funny Roger Maltby story, slightly inappropriate, but this is for mature audiences. This podcast, anyway. I'm flying home from the Open Championship one year. I got upgraded to the pointy end of the bird, and Maltby happened to be seated next to me, and so we chit chatted or whatever. And it's a long flight. And so I was queued up a movie to watch, and I was watching The Devil's Advocate, and I could see him. You can kind of feel the person next to you, like watching your screen. It's like a weird thing because you could have watched it himself on his own screen, but whatever. I didn't really care, but I'd never seen the movie before. And at some point, Charlize Theron appears on the screen topless, and I just couldn't resist. I looked over at Roger, and he's watching, and he gave me this huge grin and like 2 thumbs up. Like, it was so great. I've never forgotten it.
That's amazing. Now, this isn't a serious question. Do you think that LIV had anything to do with them being replaced? Meaning, like, they are kind of old school, right? I love both of them, as but Shane Bacon's out there, Smiley's starting to get into it. Colt Knost is making a name for himself. Like, I mean, he's very good he's already made a name for himself, but maybe moving up to like a bigger role at NBC. I don't know that. I'm just throwing out names. Do you think that, like, trying to make the game younger, that LIV has kind of pushed, not that it had any big thing to do, but just like on a smaller scale, do you think that golf is more cognizant of the product they put out? The PGA Tour is more cognizant of the product they put out.
Yes, in a word, absolutely. And even before LIV was on the scene, the CBS was very aware that Masters telecast was getting older and older by the year. And I don't know this for sure, but I believe it's well north of 60, the average age of the person watching the Masters. So, now I'm the oldest person in this group, but we all have some attachment to Roger. I remember him very well as a player, but even if you never knew that part of him, just as a presence in your lives. But there's a lot of people under 25 just like, who's this guy? So sure, I don't think there's any question.
Yeah, in a world where Dude Perfect is kicking beach balls in Amen Corner, like clearly it's on the minds of the golf decision makers. And there's this whole generation that is getting replaced, and I don't think it's really an indictment of any of them as individuals. I think what you said is bang on, Ryan. It's like we have to reinvent ourselves a little bit, and this is just one more step, and it will be. I agree. It'll be interesting to see who fills those roles. You know what? I was going to release the listeners, but there's one more thing we have to talk about, which is Ryan, your Alex Fitzpatrick scoop. And the story that created a lot of conversation on social media and elsewhere. For the listeners who have missed the story, and we will direct them towards it, but give a brief summary of what it means and then what the reaction's been for you personally.
Just like Monday qualifiers, we bury it at the end of the podcast. Geez, I'm just kidding. A quick summation of the story, and it does get a bit complicated, but PGA Tour U is the rankings for what used to be college seniors. And if you finish in the top 5, you got Korn Ferry status at the end of the year after NCAAs, and then you got a spot in the finals of Q School. Alex Fitzpatrick, brother of U.S. Open champion Matt Fitzpatrick, finished 6th. And according to, I hate to say according to multiple sources, because that is just awkward. According to multiple sources, and my voice is gone at this point, but he had lawyers involved. The Fitzpatrick family had lawyers involved, arguing about rankings, one particular event held during COVID in particular, and the tour gave him an exemption, a special exemption, the first in PGA Tour history that I know of, and anyone else I've talked to, and he got a spot in final stage. And in the grand scheme of things, I think you said it perfectly on in your tweet. Like, is a special exemption for Alex Fitzpatrick that big a deal in the golf world? No, but does it set a precedent that the PGA Tour is bending its rules and not having this hard line in the sand? 100%. It is becoming more and more that players have leverage, and they've never had leverage before. My opinion is, had this happened 2.5 years ago, pre-live, the PGA Tour would have told them to go pound sand. And this year, they made some sort of deal. It seems that both have an NDA because the tour won't say anything and Alex can't say anything. And it seems he has a valid point about the rankings, but it's just it seems that we're getting closer and closer to handpicking the players that are out on the PGA Tour.
I mean, that's really been happening in sports in general. I mean, you look at the NBA, the players have never had more power. They basically create their own teams, and they broker their own trades, and they form these super teams. You see it in college sports now with the NIL deals. The power is flowing back to the players. And so maybe golf with its old traditions was time, but it is interesting, and it does reveal the specter of LIV, because Matthew Fitzpatrick has been honest that he got an offer from LIV, whether that was before or after the U.S. Open.
Alex has been too. He said he turned down $2 million.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, this is a kid he's a Walker Cupper. He's a good player, but he's not a marquee player. But the Chase and Brooks Koepka playbook, it's kind of like you get the little brother on tour, and then it becomes that much more attractive for the older brother who's got the credentials. So, Alex has value to LIV because of his brother, and because maybe he'll blossom into a player. Who knows? But so it does reveal some larger truths, and it's another interesting footnote in how things are changing in professional golf. What are your thoughts, Michael?
If the tour loses its way, that it's not completely doing things by the book, then it's not the PGA Tour that we know and respect. So I think this is potentially a very serious moment in golf. Ryan and I were talking about this the other day. Pardon me for not remembering the young man's name, but a 14-year-old kid from China played in the Masters, and they gave him. Ryan, you know the gentleman's name?
Yeah, Gun Yang.
Okay, and he got a 2-stroke penalty. The whole world wanted this kid to make the cut. But he got 3 bad times, and they gave him 2-shot penalty. What are they going to do? Not give him? I mean, they have, nobody ever gets bad times, and nobody ever gets penalized for it. But this kid did. What were the Masters officials going to do? Ignore their own rules? We clocked him for 3 bad times. It's in the rule book. We're going to give it to him. So, I mean, that really is golf. Equal opportunity under the law. So if you get away from that, you get away from what golf really is all about, what serious tournament golf is all about.
This is also of a piece, Bubba Watson went public that he's, tour events have been low-key paying appearance fees for a long time to the players. They're just not called that. It's like, the corporate sponsor wants you to come speak at a cocktail party. We'll pay you $300,000 or $500,000 for half an hour of your time. I mean, it's essentially an appearance fee. It's been known in the game, but Bubba kind of blew the lid off of it. And I wrote something about it in my mailbag last week, and then I've had 2 people reach out to me because I had heard $300,000 a few times as a number. I put that in my column, and some guy wrote to me and said, he clearly was. Looking at his bio and talking to him, he knows his stuff. He was like one of those guys who was in the room. He said, you got to add a 0 to that. He's like, I know. He's like, I know one superstar asked for $4 million to do something during the week. He said another Hall of Famer icon wanted $8 million for his foundation. Now, whether these were paid is less clear, but this is a thing in golf. It always has been. We know that they pay appearance fees around the world. So the tour has always tried to put itself above it, but in reality, they've been doing the same thing.
Here's the where I think that it's different in those standpoints. And yes, I agree. But Q School has always been the place where tour pros don't have any power, and the tour, rightfully so, has had no excuses. Talked to a pro whose mother-in-law had a stroke and passed away a week before Q School. He asked for a different site. They said no. A guy this year, missed the deadline for final stage by a couple of hours. They said no. And I understand it, because then you open Pandora's boxes. Alan Shipnuck has a bum ankle and he wants to get moved. And Michael Bamberger has a sore shoulder and his mom is in the hospital. You open yourself up to endless stuff. Q School has always been the place. I was on with the Paulsons today. Q School has always been the most, those guys have a problem with PGA Tour U as a problem as a concept in general. Now, with Live, I understand it. You want to keep your young players, but Q School has always been the most democratic part of golf, right? There is no anything. You tee it up. Norman Zhang was the best college player in almost like he was the next Tiger Woods, and he lost and he didn't get through, and that's okay. That's how golf works. And I think that is the leap that we've made, that Q School, yes, those backdoor deals have been made, but Q School has always been the place where nothing happens. There is the tour never cared about those players enough to make any deals. There was no deals. It's just like, yeah, go get through first stage, dude. I don't know what to tell you. And now it's not. And we are sliding quickly down a hill that is going to be a lot of handshake deals and lawyers and all those kind of things. It's not a great place.
Well, if the tour is not really careful here, they will kill the goose, because all of corporate America is so way into golf for a lot of reasons, and one of which is, these fine young men are such, principles and show. It doesn't even need to be spoken. It's just said. It's a merit-based system. The rule book does whatever it can to eliminate ambiguity. To your point, Ryan, there are some areas like medical exemptions and major medical extensions where they've got to read tea leaves, and it gets very difficult for the tour. And there's always a lot of fussing about that. But this sort of, and even Bubba getting paid to go to a cocktail party, and whether it's $3 million or $300,000, yeah, it's shady and it's in the gray area, but it doesn't really affect two central things here: is what actually happens in the tournament, Are the scorecards strictly accurate? And how do you get into the tournament in the first place? Those two things are the underpinning of what makes the PGA Tour the PGA Tour.
That's why it matters. It's access is never been more important. And when you start cluttering that up with agendas and handshake deals, it gets very messy very quickly. So I would encourage any of the listeners, if you haven't seen Ryan's excellent story, go to firepitcollective.com, check that out. We also we will make sure that Andy Ogletree's earlier Fire Drill podcast is prominent, so you can find that as well, because it's a great background on how the professional game is changing, and actually a really interesting kid who has become an unlikely protagonist in this whole golf season. So we covered a lot of ground on this podcast. Want to thank all the listeners for making it this far. You guys have any final thoughts before we go?
Well, I get to do a podcast with Michael Bamberger in his pajamas. That's my final thought.
In the group thread, Ryan was going to call it this was his Willis Reed game, or his Jordan flu game, because he's clearly under the weather, but he powered through an hour and 15 minutes of podding. So it's a heroic effort. You've entered the annals.
It really is. It really is.
Great
articles will be written about this podcast.
No doubt by you, Ryan.
They might be by me.
Anyway,
I might write my own article about my own podcast.
The heroism. All right. Well, if you've enjoyed this podcast, Against All Odds, we have another podcast offering in our network that's going to drop here in 2 days. Michael Bamberger, myself, Jeff Ogilvie. It's called Need a Fourth, as the title might hint. We bring on a mystery guest every week. One of the hosts is responsible for that. The other two don't know who's coming on. And so it leads to some very freewheeling, fun, spontaneous conversations. We have a really interesting mix of guests, some hardcore golf people, some folks who are golf adjacent, but just really love the game and have a different perspective. So that will be coming to your ears soon. And we hope you'll check it out, because Michael and I have had a great time recording these conversations, as has Jeff. All right, I can sense the fatigue from my co-host. So we're gonna go. This has been another Fire Drill podcast. Thank you for listening. We'll do it again. They're usually Sunday evenings because of some travel issues. This one's going up Monday afternoon, but we are committed to doing this every week. So thank you for listening. The end.